Hi everyone, this is Koinzell here, and we have the Mistsplitter Reforged ready for Ayato. I'm going to talk about the design issues that we will have because obviously Mistsplitter is not designed for him, it's designed for Ayaka. And of course the other characters can make use of it, but not all characters. Then we have the damage that Ayato can do in Torgana, as well as all the other comms, most of the comms that I've covered so far. We have the Torgana, Kamisato, and OverVape HyperCarry. And then we go into the TLDR, which is a repeat of, or not a repeat, but a concise version of what we have covered before. So, obviously, if you want to, just skip the TLDR if you don't want the specifics, but I'm just going to go through the specifics first, alright? So first off, Mistsplitter Reforged for Ayato. On paper, I'll say Mistsplitter looks pretty good for Ayato, being able to buff both his Q and E, and having a slightly lower damage percent than Haran. In fact, slightly lower for his E compared to Haran, because Haran gives you 52 and 104% between R1 and R5, but Mistsplitter is 40 and 80. But that's on paper. Let's look at the conditions required for gaining stats on Mistsplitter. So base, there is a 12%. You have 3 different stats that gives you 8, 16, 28 at R1. But more importantly, you gain stat by doing normal attack with elemental damage, casting or elemental burst, and energy less than 100%. So look at the text highlighted in red. Normal attack deals elemental damage. Ayato can do it, right? In his E, he can easily do it. But if you have been following my math guides, we always do Ayato Q early in the rotation before his E. And if you try to do his E and cancel it early, go to his Q, technically speaking it's okay. His E cooldown is only... No, his E cooldown is 12 seconds, right? So if you cancel it early, you have to have a really long rotation before you can use his E again. That's one. 2, you can't really utilize all of these things if you use your E before Q. So I always do Q early in my rotation because we want to fully utilize the duration. 18-second duration with a 20-second cooldown. You have normal attack bonus as well from his Q that you get while using your E. You also gain energy from his E. Okay, so all of these are benefits that we need in a rotation with Ayato that is typically very tight because of the longer on-field time that he requires, as opposed to other characters anyway. Not the typical main DPS per se, but you'll see why. If you have been following my math guides, you know what I've been talking about. So let's talk about the first issue and the second issue. There are 2 issues mainly that I see with Mistsplitter Reforged for Ayato. That being said, it's not that I will not do the math, we already have the math done, but I wanted to point out the issues and let you guys know what we are working with here. Okay, for Ayato, how it works, how Mistsplitter works for him, how it fares for him. So first issue, if you use his E just to get an NE stat before his Q, you lose out on all 3 benefits above for 6 seconds. If you are trying to do 2 E1Q, or you do 1 E1Q with the E before the Q. So I wouldn't recommend it, not to mention your rotation is extended. By the way, even if you do E, you do 1 hit, your rotation is still extended by at least 2 seconds. Because it takes time for him to move, cast his water illusion, move backwards from it, start 1 attack. It all takes time. So it's not ideal. So I'll say design wise, you cannot get all 3 stats of Mistsplitter on his Q with Ayato alone. You only get 2 stats. So it's going to be 16% instead of 28%, which means it's going to be 16 plus 12, 28% in total, instead of 40%. You basically lose out 12%. And remember, how Mistsplitter works for Ayaka, she also does an elemental normal attack before casting a Q when you're using Mistsplitter. So I'm going to do the math based on 2 stats for his Q. I'm not going to assume 3 stats because it doesn't make sense. There is no efficient way to get 3 stats on his Q if you want to cast his Q early. Even casting the E and cancelling it early extends your rotation by 2 seconds. Spend 2 seconds to get a 12% damage boost. Not very worth it. because it's not like he doesn't have damage percentage bonus from other sources, and this 12% is a diminishing return. It's less than 12%. Okay. Now we have issue. Obviously, we need to try to do a workaround, right? So let's do workaround. Obviously, we can use someone like Chongyun or even C6 Bandit to infuse Ayato normal attack without his E. But Chongyun doesn't do a cryo battery roll as well as Diona or any other of the other cryo batteries like Kea or Rosara, etc. Although I don't recommend Kea for Ayato because of the distance. So there will be energy issues. Okay, the energy math is really pretty bad. There will be rotations issues too because Chongyun needs to E as the very first action. Unlike your current rotation where your battery is always doing it after Ayato E, so that you have the time to use your battery to cast E, switch to Ganyu or Ayaka, whoever it is, to receive the energy, and continue and repeat whatever you need if that's sacrificial, for example. But imagine if you bring this all the way to the front, when your Ganyu has not even cast her Q. So I use the Chongyun E, what am I going to get? That means this only works for the second rotation. Okay, so rotation issue, energy issue. I might try to test this out when Ayato is live, you know, doing maybe Chongyun E, Ganyu, or maybe even Ganyu Q. But I can tell you guys that I did a quick simulation. With just Chongyun E Q, Ayato N1 Q, your rotation is already extended by 1.5 seconds. So I'm really not hopeful that the DPS is better by forcing Chongyun for that Mistsplitter stack. So it's very similar to like if you use Ayato, you can use his E, you hit the one hit with his E and then you cancel into the Q. It's the same concept. Okay, you are wasting time extending your rotation just for that third stack. It's not convenient. It's not like Ayaka's case, where it's part of a kit, part of the design itself. The energy math is also looking pretty bad. You need a lot more ER on Ganyu and Ayato if you try to force Chongyun in here. Chongyun is also not good for Kamisato comp because he doesn't provide sustained off-field cryo application. If you watch my math guide regarding the Kamisato comp, I already said that Ayaka doesn't have sustained off-field cryo application. If you're going to use Ayato as the main DPS attacking, you do want to have a off-field cryo application, like Diona's Q, Rosara's Q, yeah. So although there's a workaround, there are issues with the workaround that doesn't really make the workaround work. Now, second issue, the step from casting Q lasts 10 seconds. In our Torgana rotation, that translates to only about first half of his E having 3 stats. And I actually looked into the rotation, I tried to cut it shorter, but it can't be done because we do need to cast our elemental burst on Ganyu, our elemental burst on Venti, in order to set up freeze comp. Otherwise, there's no freeze comp. So it's gonna be 3 stats and 2 stats distributed between his E. In fact, I'll say that slightly less than half has the 3 stats because of the initial water illusion cast time. Because he cast the water illusion, move backwards, then you start attack, get into his pose, then or stance, then he starts attacking. So yeah, it's not ideal. Now, possible workaround. Maybe change the rotation. Let's move Ayato, Q, and E together, and we set up our Ganyu Q, our Venti E, etc. Sounds feasible, right? But think about the issues that this causes. Okay, this causes. You will lose 15 energy bonus from Venti for Ayato because it will be infused with Cryo instead. So you're gonna need to build a lot more ER on Ayato, which I don't recommend. Especially since it doesn't need as much ER in other comps. If you've seen my Kamisato comp math guide where I update a quick update on the Ganyu math, okay, the Torgana math, you'll see that I already recommend that you need to build something like 130 to 140 ER for Ganyu. For Ayato in Torgana comp. Imagine if now without 15 energy I need to build even more. That's going to be a significant DPS loss as opposed to 110 to 130. Because now you're going beyond just having base rolls, you need upgrades into ER. That's bad. And the other thing is, you use your Ayato Q, then you use your Ayato E immediately. You're gonna gain much lesser energy from his passive if you use it this way. Because Ayato's passive only works when he's off field. So in other words, right, by the time you're off field, 6 seconds have passed. You have dished out a lot of damage. You have obtained the 23 plus energy from your E itself, and on top of that, the energy from enemies. In fact, if you have high energy from enemies in your first 6 seconds of E, you may even end up with 0 energy from his passive. So that's very bad. That's a very bad energy issue. Because no matter how high your ER is, without energy particle, the high ER is useless. Okay? And look at the actions after the Ayato E. They are all about giving energy to Ganyu, not Ayato. So imagine if you have to change your rotation further to make it such that it gives more energy to Ayato as well. Then you need to switch into Ayato when his E and Q is on cooldown. What are you gonna do with him? Use his physical normal attacks? Not good. So, last point, with Ganyu's Q already present, you can also guarantee the Hydro Swirl. You may get it before its first E strike, or you may only get it after the first few E strikes. It really depends on the elements that is on the opponents when your Venti's burst is swirling. So I hope you guys see what are the design issues that we have with regards to Mistsplitter for Ayato. I mean, it's a weapon that's not designed for him to begin with. So the math will be 2 stats for his Q, 3 stats for first 6 strikes of his E, and 2 stats for remaining 8 strikes of his E. Okay, because remember, E is 14 strikes without any attack speed buff. So 4 echoes triggers, I'll just be divided by half. Okay, sorry, that's a typo. Divided by half. Okay, to simplify. I know it looks very unoptimized, but like I said, Mistsplitter is not designed for Ayato in the first place, and then I've already listed all the issues arising from workarounds as well. Think about it this way, okay? Do you guys really think that when Hoyoverse did the changes in beta on his passive and Haran, they didn't consider Mistsplitter in comparison as well? It's not their first gacha game, by the way. Why would they do a new weapon that does significantly worse or does worse than Mistsplitter, the existing weapon? Doesn't make sense. But that being said, you guys will be pleasantly surprised with the figures that Mistsplitter is churning out, even with it being unoptimized. Okay, but I don't want to give away too much. Let's look into the damage itself. This portion here is the same as the Torgana math video, so I'm not really going to go through it, but I'll put it here so that at least you guys can see what's included, what's not included, buffs wise. Okay, so these are the damage figures. You'll see that between the Q and E, especially at C6R5, it's quite drastic. The Q has improved very significantly, which is to be expected since the Mistsplitter buffs his Q a lot more than his E in comparison. In relative comparison, even at C0, the Q is doing more damage than the E, but the E is still doing a very significant amount of damage, so don't skip the E. So his Q does more damage than his E at C01, like I mentioned, and only about 30+% less than his E at C6R5. Okay. Now this is just the figure that you see in Torgana. How about we do an actual comparison against Haran, his signature weapon, in Torgana.com. So these are the figures. We have the Haran figures here. Okay, C6R5, C0, R1. Then the rotation. And this is the percentage difference when we compare the rotation figure. Rotation on the both is the same. It's all 20 seconds. Both of it is 20 seconds. Do you see the rate figures? Interesting stuff, right? So, even with Mistsplitter design versus Ayato's causing some unoptimization on the stats per se, there are still scenarios where Mistsplitter performs better than Haran. Basically, when you see a positive figure, it means that Mistsplitter is performing better than Haran. If you see a red figure, Haran is better than Mistsplitter. So you see that at C0 and C1, okay, C0 and C1, Mistsplitter is always slightly better than Haran. It's by 0.67 to 2.60%. Okay? Interesting result, right? It means that if you are going C0, C1, if you have an existing Mistsplitter, it's actually better than Haran. You don't need to pull for Haran. But there are obviously more factors to consider, and I'll talk about those later. At C2, they are more or less similar. Since the percentage differences are so small, I don't really want to say which is higher or lower. They are really just pretty much the same, okay? Some scenarios higher, some scenarios lower. At C3, Haran starts to perform better now. At least it's more significant, the difference, as opposed to the C2. So it's about 0.68 to 1.32%. At C6, however, Haran has much better performance at 4%. Now, I know a lot of people argue that 4% isn't that great, but remember that we are comparing against your weapon. We are not talking about artifact stats here. There are people who will see the 4%, oh, I just need to get a better artifact stat and I can cover that 4%. But remember, this comparison is based on your artifacts being absolutely the same. Okay? And I need you guys to understand, the viewers, to understand this very important point here. Okay? The results are like this because we are assuming every Q strike hits every enemy, which means that all of your enemies are grouped together and everyone is within the range of each Q strike. And the each Q strike, when it chooses the enemy to strike, it will always be able to strike everyone. I can tell you guys, realistically speaking, even with freeze comp, this may not happen 100%. Because mob spawns in waves. Okay, mob spawn in waves. It takes time for the second wave to be gathered. If you ever use freeze comp in Abyss, you know what I mean. Okay, I don't need to explain further than this. Of course, assuming that they do spawn while anti-Q is still active, maybe you happen to clear the mob wave, the first wave, really within your entire freeze comp rotation. That's possible as well. For me, I always have a situation where the second wave is being spawn while anti-Q is still active, and then you see them getting pulled back in, slowly moving and pulled back in. And in those cases, right now, even if Ganyu is Q, you are gonna be losing coordinate skilling on that, because they're just far apart, man. Can't be helped. So please understand, this is a result that's very applicable to freeze comp because of how his Q works. In an OverVape HyperCarry, the gap between Haran and Mistsplitter would definitely be bigger, and it will be in favor of Haran because Kazuha only pulls once, right? Not like Venti consistent pull with a larger pull and larger AoE as well. So just bear this in mind before you watch my video and then go conclude that Mistsplitter is better than Haran for every scenario and every comp. Doesn't work that way. Okay? Anyone who tells you gives you some motherhood statement like that, or general statement like that, don't believe them, because that's not how Genshin works really. Okay, so we have talked about Torgana comp, basically Ayato in Ganyu freeze comp. Now let's talk about Ayato in Ayaka freeze comp, which is the Kamisato comp. This is the Haran figure, this is the Mistsplitter figures. This looks like two simple tables, right? But oh my god, the math involved in doing this, and I have to do it for OverVape as well. So that's why it took me a little longer to do this video, and I apologize for that. But I hope you guys understand the complexity involved. This is, after an entire worksheet of math, you get this table. Okay? So, right off the bat, I think you see some figures. Okay? Now let's look at the analysis itself. We have an actual percentage difference. Now you see a lot more red figures, which means that Haran is starting to do a lot more better. Why is this the case for Ayaka freeze comp? And why is it so different from the Ganyu freeze comp? It's simple, because my Ayaka or the Kamisato comp, the rotation doesn't allow more than 2 steps for Ayato's E. If you look at my previous math guide when I talk about the ideal or recommended rotation for the Ayaka freeze comp or the Kamisato comp, we need to do a lot of actions between the Ayato's Q until Ayato's E, which was a good thing in the Kamisato comp because it helped him, Ayato, get a lot more energy from his passive as well. Do you see now? The whole concept of Mistsplitter, using the Q lasts 10 seconds, but at the same time, Ayato's passive wants you to gain energy off field after his Q is cast, because that's when you can start gaining energy, because your energy is not full. So, design issue. okay, I shouldn't call it a design issue, it's more like this weapon wasn't designed for Ayato to begin with. Now, since the rotation doesn't allow for more than 2 stats, so it's all 2 stats throughout his Ayato's E when I do the math here. Basically, Mistsplitter only performs very slightly better. It's a 0.07%. I don't even know why I bothered to mention this. 0.07% to 0.58% than Haran. And only for 4 HOD, by the way, at C0 and C1, which is this. While it performs worse than Haran in all other scenarios. Okay, but to be fair, right, for C0 and C1, even for 4 echoes, the difference is quite small. Although at 8 triggers, when you're lucky, the difference is a lot more significant per se. So I hope you guys can appreciate what I'm trying to say here. Basically, the difference between Haran and Mistsplitter for Ayaka, Freeze Com, or Kamisato Com is bigger than it's smaller than in Torgana Com, and it's smaller in lower constellations, with the biggest difference at 5%. Okay. Don't worry, I'll do an overall conclusion when we finish running through all the comms. I'll do an overall conclusion and recommendation with regards to whether to go for Mistsplitter or Haran, depending on which constellation you're at as well. Okay? So that's Kamisato Com. Now let's talk about OverVape HyperCarry. We have our Haran figures, we have our Haran DPS figure, okay, damage figure and DPS figure. Now, one thing to note is that the Q damage here has been updated to reflect the fact that we can't always hit every single enemy with his Q when we don't have NT, when we have Kazuha and we're not even actively using Kazuha's E with 100% uptime because of the rotation duration. Now, we also have Mistsplitter figures here. See the difference? The Q will always be better on Mistsplitter, but the E will always be better on Haran. So what does that translate to? This is the difference here. And this time around, it's a bit different, the way I compare. Basically, the black figures imply that Haran is better. Okay, Haran is better, not Mistsplitter. Which is expected because E is the main source for damage in the OverVape HyperCarry. Your Q can't connect every strike on every enemy. So obviously Haran pulls ahead by 6 to 12%. And bear in mind that when I do the FreezeCom figures, right? When I did the FreezeCom figures, it assumes every strike. And when you're up against a single target, you're not going to hit every strike. If it works like Ganyu. It's a cap. Like Ganyu has 50 icicles, but against a single target, it only does 10 strikes unless it's a super huge size opponent like Ashtaha. Even someone like Primo Jovishet, you can't get for all 50 strikes. I've actually talked about this. In the Shenhe Ganyu math video. How many icicles you typically get against a humanoid-sized monster like Child, or a boss like Child, a single target like Child, versus Primo Jovishet versus Ashtaha. So just bear this in mind. Right now this figure is very ideal for the Mistsplitter. It's assuming you always have at least 5 enemies. So if it's single target, your Mistsplitter will also fall off. So please bear that in mind. Now, so we already said that Haran pulls ahead by 6 to 12%. Okay, you don't need to be super lucky. At R5, even with 6 triggers, it's 12%. So if you're going to use Ayato in the OverVape HyperCarry, or you expect that you don't always do multiple enemy scenario, Haran is definitely better, even at C0R1. Against a boss, for sure, Haran will do better than Mistsplitter, because your burst can't hit all, unless you're talking like someone like Ashtaha. So I hope that's clear. Let's go into the TLDR here. Mistsplitter issues. Now I know that most people skip to this section, so I kind of have to go through this again. If you have been following me in the video throughout, I thank you for your patience in watching. And let's dive right in. So first issue, Ayato needs to use his Q before his E as part of his ideal design. Mistsplitter is reverse, where you need to do an elemental any then use Q, because Ayato's Q snapshots. And I can tell you guys doing 2E 1Q is worse than 1E 1Q as shared in earlier Ayato math guides, so for overall DPS especially, so that is not an option. So a potential workaround would be to use Chongyun or C6 Bennett to infuse elemental damage or normal attack before Ayato Q. Sounds doable, right? Let's talk about the issues that arise from this workaround. Because whenever you try to do a workaround, it's always not the most ideal solution. There will be issues. So first off, Chongyun is not a good cryo battery. He needs to use his E at the start of rotation before Ayato Q as well. So because of these 2 points, it causes both rotation and energy issues. If you want to know more in detail, look at the specific session earlier. I'm not going to go repeat myself again. The energy math for Ganyu and Ayato is really bad, especially for Ganyu. I think we are lacking like 20 plus energy, and Ayato as well, with Chongyun. Rotation is extended as well, because you're going to do a Chongyun Q, for sure. In Torgana, you remember I don't even use Diona Q unless necessary. Ayato N1, before Ayato Q, that's going to cause you rotation extension as well. C6 Bennett for OverVape HyperCarry is a possibility, yes. But we all know that it's not a good idea to reduce your Bennett's flexibility by going C6, right? Not to mention, even if you have C6 Bennett, if you do 1 and Ayato N1 before Ayato Q, it still extends your rotation. Okay, so I hope this is clear. Second issue. Mistsplitter stack from using Q lasts 10 seconds, which is too short for Ayato E to enjoy the full duration in both Torgana and OverVape HyperCarry comp. And it's even worse for Kamisato. You don't even get to enjoy this step basically. It's not an issue for his Q because of snapshotting. Okay, it's not an issue for his Q because of snapshotting. So even though it lasts 10 seconds, your Q lasts 18 seconds. Because it's snapshots, you don't need to worry about it for the Q. But for his E, it doesn't snapshot, so you don't get the full duration. So essentially this is a breakdown, okay? Torgana, you get about 6 E strikes with 3 of the Mistsplitter stats, remaining 8 enjoy 2 stats. OverVape HyperCarry is the other way around, 8 enjoy 3, 6 enjoy 2. Kamisato, all enjoy 2, no 3. Potential workaround is to change Ayato Q to cast after Venti and Ganyu Q before Ayato E. Your Venti and Ganyu Q are needed before Venti E for your pull and your freeze. Otherwise, I don't know why you are using them, because you are using them for freeze comp. They need to do those actions before Ayato starts attacking. Otherwise, there is no freeze. So there are issues arising from this as well. First, 15 energy from Venti passes goes to Ganyu instead of Ayato. Right? Because you're not casting Ayato Q. You are casting Ayato Q right before Ayato E. Your Venti does its actions before that. It will be infused with Cryo. So you're gonna need higher ER on Ayato, which affects your DPS. You're gonna get less energy gain from his passive if you use Ayato E right after Q. Okay? Makes sense, right? Because Ayato's passive works based on Ayato being off-field. It may be even 0 energy from his passive if you get high energy from enemies in 6 seconds of E. So that results in an even higher ER required. And let me change the music. Sorry, the music was a little loud there. Okay, so let me continue. Wait, hang on. Sorry, that's the issue with SL that I always have. So anyway, like I said, lesser energy from his passive, you need even, which means that these 2 factors combined together, your Ayato needs like maybe even 180 ER, which is really bad. And with Ganyu's Q already present, Hydro Sword is not as guaranteed, because your Venti, while it still swirls in his burst, you can't guarantee it unless enemy really does have Hydro at a point in time. So you may not even get it on the before the first E strike, or maybe you get it before the first E strike, maybe you get it after the first few E strikes. I can't guarantee it for you. Nobody, no theory crafter or YouTuber can guarantee that for you if you are setting up like this. So this is a very bad workaround if you ask me. Okay, so I hope you guys understand. Mistsplitter is just not designed for Ayato. You're gonna get 2 stats for Q and a mix of 2 or 3 on his E, with Kamisato comp having 2 throughout his E. But it's expected because it's, like I said, Mistsplitter wasn't designed for Ayato in the first place, and potential workarounds actually creates even more issues. Do you really think that Hoyoverse did the changes in beta on his passive and Haran? They didn't consider Mistsplitter in comparison at that time in time? It's not their first Pakaja game, man. Okay. So let's go on to the next point for the TLDR. Torgana, Ayato, Mistsplitter. So with Mistsplitter, his Q now does more damage than his E at C0R1 and only 30 plus percentage less than his E at C6R5. For the detailed figures, please refer to the earlier section itself. Next on, we do the comparison for Torgana, Ayato using Mistsplitter versus Haran. Even with the unoptimized stats that I talked about earlier, Mistsplitter performs very well, especially at lower constellations. At C0 and C1, Mistsplitter is always slightly better than Haran by about 0.67 to 2.6%. C2, they are more or less the same because the percentage difference is really small. So they are basically the same. At C3, Haran starts to perform better by 0.68 to 1.32%. At C3, sorry, I mentioned wrongly, that was C3. At C6, Haran performs better by 4%. However, the reason why Mistsplitter is performing so well is because we are assuming every Q strike hits every enemy. Every enemy is within the range of each Q strike. You have at least 5 enemies. Realistically, even with FreezeCom, this may not happen because your mobs spawn in waves. It takes time for your second wave to be gathered, assuming they spawn while Vandy Q is still active. And it's possible for that to happen. I have had that happen so many times in Abyss, in Spiral Abyss. And not to mention, we are assuming here every Q strike hits every enemy, which means that against a single target or less than 5 targets, if it works the same as Ganyu's Q. If you want to know more about how Ganyu's Q works, okay, side note, if you really want to know more about how Ganyu's Q works, check out my video on Ganyu Shenhe Math Guide, because that is the one where I go into detail on how those icicle works, the 50 icicles in Ganyu works, against a single target, who gets hits with more strikes, who doesn't get hit with, who gets hit with less strikes. And the same is likely going to apply to Ayato. So bear this in mind, this is for the ideal FreezeCom scenario. If you are up against a single target and you use FreezeCom, your your Q is not going to do as much damage as what I have here, which means that Haran will do much better than Mistsplitter in a single target scenario, even for FreezeCom. Okay, so for the detailed figures, please refer to the earlier section itself. Next one, we move to Kamisato. So like I said, Kamisato doesn't allow more than 2 steps for Ayato's E because the rotation is so long, because there are so many things they need to do for the Ayaka, Ayato, FreezeCom. So Mistsplitter performs worse in Kamisato than in Torgana, but there is still a scenario where it performs better, although it's very slightly better, 0.07 to 0.58% better than Haran for 4-piece HOD at C0 and C1. While it performs worse than Haran in all other scenarios, but the difference is smaller at lower constellations, with the biggest difference at C6R5, it's about 5%. Even with 6 triggers, not 8 triggers. Okay, so yeah, Haran is better in Ayaka, Ayato, FreezeCom. Which makes sense because anyway, you want to give the Mistsplitter to Ayaka unless you have 2 copies of Mistsplitter that you are using. Then yeah, you're a chat, man. You're a Giga Chat. Or Giga Chat. Okay, anyway, that's Kamisato Com. Next is OverVape HyperCarry. So OverVape HyperCarry, your E is the main source of damage. Your Q can't connect every strike on every enemy, so Haran pulls ahead by 6 to 12%. So can you see the difference? When the Q can't connect every strike on every enemy, it pulls ahead by quite a big difference compared to the percentage figures that we have here. So in other words, for FreezeCom, let me repeat that again. For FreezeCom, this right now the figures here is assuming you have the ideal scenario where you have more than 5 or at least 5 enemies. But if you're out against a single target that is humanoid size and not Ashtaha size, your Haran and Mistsplitter difference is going to pull ahead to be a percentage difference that's much closer to this, with Haran being better than Mistsplitter. Okay, so conclusion. I talked so much, so let me just do a recommendation whether to pull for which weapon. So to conclude, right, even with the issues for Mistsplitter design versus Ayato's design, Mistsplitter does very well for a non-signature weapon. And this is how I will do the conclusion or summary. For Torgana, at C3 plus, Haran is better. C2 Haran same as C2 Mistsplitter, C0 C1 Mistsplitter slightly better, 0.67 to 2.6%. For Kamisato, Haran is always better, up to 5%, while being similar with Mistsplitter at C0 C1 with 4 HOD. For OverVape HyperCarry, Haran is always better by 6 to 12%. For C3 plus Ayato, regardless of com, Haran is always better. So other than com, once you go C3 and above, Haran is always better. Essentially, based on these 4 statements here, unless you are dead set on Torgana, I would say Haran is still better and much better in OverVape HyperCarry. Even in Torgana, Mistsplitter is only slightly better, so it's still fine to use Haran unless you already have a Mistsplitter that no one will be using at the same time with Ayato. Okay. And I have not even mentioned the single target and multiple targeting on the 2 freeze comps. Once it is not a multiple target scenario, Haran will do even better. Okay, and maybe I should type that down because there are some folks who don't really listen to what I'm saying. Maybe they just look at the text here. So I'm just going to say this. Bear in mind that for Torgana and Kamisato, if there are lesser than 5 enemies, Haran will perform better. The lesser the enemies, the better Haran performs. Unless it's extra hard. Extra hard actually can get hit by all 50 strikes of Ganyu's Icicle, by the way. Provided you cast it at the right spot. Okay, if you don't have Mistsplitter right now, I would think that pulling for Haran is better. Why? Because Ayato's weapon banner will likely come with Venti's allergy for the end, which is BIS for Venti, especially in Torgana and Kamisato. And also, OverVape HyperCarry uses Kazuha. Because it boosts your overall team DPS, and who's the major DPS dealer? It's your Cryo DPS and your Hydro DPS in Torgana and Kamisato. So Venti sacrificing a little of his own damage in return to buff the whole team is definitely better. Just FYI, my current math is based on Strinders, so allergy will increase Ayato's figures even further. Okay? Ayaka's weapon banner will likely feature a standard 5-star weapon. Whatever 5-star weapon that you can find on the standard banner. Along with her Mistsplitter, because hers is a single character banner, there's no rerun. She runs as a single banner. On a side note, I was a little surprised when I saw Ayaka rerun banner solo when I was watching the live stream. But now I see why. Now I understand why, because they want to make her weapon banner not as attractive as Ayaka's weapon banner. But this is something to consider, definitely. But another approach you can take is to always wait until Ayaka weapon banner is officially announced to decide. I might be wrong, maybe it's not a standard banner, but more likely than not, it is going to be one of those 5-star weapon that's on a standard banner. But it could be a good weapon, maybe, but I always say the chances of it being a good weapon together with Mistsplitter is pretty low. Unlike the Ayaka weapon banner where it's going to be Haran, likely going to be Haran together with allergy for the end. And when the banner information is out, I'll definitely mention this again. If you have Mistsplitter right now, and you don't intend to use Ayaka together with Kamisato, you can skip Haran and just switch Mistsplitter between them. Because I know weapon banner is scary. Right? It can give you trauma, man. But if you intend to go C3 plus on Ayato, or you intend to use him in OverVape HyperCarry, then I would say it's still better to try to get Haran. Okay? Now for 4-star weapons, I'll do the math for them as well, but probably after the other videos in the pipeline now. I really want to do the constellation and refinement comparison. That's likely going to be the next video. Okay. So this is the end of the TLDR. I hope this has been helpful to you guys in terms of understanding how Mistsplitter fares against his signature weapon Haran. And for me personally, it's going to be a very hard decision because I'm cutting down my cost, so all the new 5-star weapons I'm getting at R1. But Mistsplitter I have R5. So you see my conundrum. R5 Mistsplitter would definitely do better than R1 Haran. So yeah, for me I can't say for sure that I will be pulling for Haran. But not gonna lie, if Ayato's weapon banner comes as Haran plus Allergy for the end, then I'll say it's a pretty good weapon banner to pull for. As long as the 4-star weapons aren't all crap. Typically on the weapon banner, 4-star weapons wise, you usually have 2 or 3 that's good while the others are bad. That's just how it is. So anyway, let's talk about what's coming next. We have completed artifact comparison, team cons, basic guide. We have done Mistsplitter. I have not done 4-star weapons, but what's coming next is constellation refinement comparison for gladiators and 4-star weapons, and anything else that you guys may want. Okay, but obviously that's subject to my availability, my time availability. And you can please do join me over at Twitch, where I answer almost every question there. And the link is in the description as well, and this is the link. This is the URL. Okay, so thanks everyone for watching. If you like the content, remember my video and click subscribe for more. Bye.